Welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. So I'm Wes Marshall, professor of civil engineering, author of the book Killed by a Traffic Engineer, and with me, as always, we have...
I'm David Zipper, a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative and a contributing writer at Vox and Bloomberg City Lab.
And probably more if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
That's
all
enough.
Right, so... Before we get started, I wanted to ask you a question that it might be good advice for people that might be in the same situation. So let's say you're moving to a new city or maybe a new metro area. Like, how would you personally go about looking for the neighborhood or the part of town you'd want to live in? So, like, I'm not asking like about the house or whether you want X bedrooms, Y baths. Like, it's more about how you would narrow down like the part of town or the neighborhood, like where you'd want to start looking for where you'd want to live.
Gosh. Well, I can tell you back when I had a lot of flexibility in this, when I was right out of college and single and whatever, this may be politically incorrect. I hope it's not. But my answer then would be this is how I ended up in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. after college, was to ask where the gay community is. I happen to be straight, but the gay community is just so much fun. They're always going out. I have so many gay friends. That was just where it was better to live. Probably not what you were expecting me to say, but it's an honest answer.
That's great.
And now it's funny. I bought my current place, 5 years ago? I still live in DC. I moved to Boston and lived abroad and to New York in between, but now I'm back in DC, and I chose this place or this neighborhood because I am close to what's called the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which is sort of have you been on it before? It's like this artery of a protected bike trail that goes all the way from Union Station in DC north to Maryland now. And I thought it was going to be an easy way to commute. And I felt like I valued that more than other people. So I'd get added marginal value from living in the area than others who were really wanting to live on top of a metro station or whatever else. So that's sort of how I did think about it and how I kind of thought about it more recently. How about you?
No, that's interesting. Like I did move very recently, but we only moved like 4 blocks. And like where I'm at now, I'm literally at the intersection of 2 like off-street bike trails. So I can go east, west, or north, south from where I live. And also I can walk across the street and I got like 20 restaurants like right near me. But like when I moved to Denver 15 years ago, like I knew I'd be on this campus downtown, and I literally just mapped out like where the bike trails were, where the trains were, where the trains were going to be. And I sort of looked for neighborhoods that were on those direction pathways. Like I ended up picking what was at the time known as Stapleton. This is now called Central Park, but that's a whole nother story. But it's a new urbanist neighborhood where the old airport was here. And I'd done research and work with new urbanism and stuff. So a part of me was like, I'll put my money where my mouth is. And like with that, they were building schools and stuff. So my oldest at the time was about to go to kindergarten, so that made a big difference as well. So it was that combination of transportation and neighborhood amenities and that sort of stuff. Like I do remember when I was house shopping, like my realtor was like, let's go see this house. It would be like on one of the bigger arterials. I'd be like, we don't even need to go in. Like there's no way I'm ever going to buy this house. He's like, well, what if you like the inside? I was like, it doesn't matter if I like the inside. Like that street matters more to me than whatever house you could possibly show me. And he could never wrap his head around that, like my focus on that. So that was interesting.
That makes sense. And I like how you sort of mapped out where you want to go. You said that was by bike path. Was that right?
It was by bike, because there's the Cherry Creek Trail right behind me. So you can start following that, or, it goes south and north and eventually starts going to the east. And then you can start doing it with where the trains were at the time and where I knew they were going to go. So where I live now is where the A line is. So that's the train to the airport. And that's one of those lines like, is going to get built. Like it took them, it's like 7 years before it was eventually built. But now there's a great train, the commuter rail that goes right between my neighborhood and Union Station here.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, I'll say like I'm largely a bike commuter now. Although back when I had an office, at least I was a bike commuter. Now I sort of work from home or wherever I happen to be. But I will say that like being if you're comfortable commuting by bike, it really opens up city neighborhoods because you no longer need to be like a lot of people do in a big city like DC, at least, like on top of the rail stations. You can be proximate to downtown, but in some other areas that are not as well served by, at least by rail, if not transit. And frankly, that's sort of how I ended up where I am now, in one of those sorts of slivers. It's not that close to a rail station, but I don't care that much because I bike. And it's really easy to get where I want to go by bike.
Yeah. No, I thought I would use the train a lot more than I do. I probably use it maybe 5% of the time. I'm biking, like even today we have a very few rainy days in Denver. Today's one of them. I still biked. But I use the train to go to the airport. I mean, that's going the other direction. It's very useful to me. So yeah, I know. I thought, if someone else is going to a new city and they're looking for advice on this, it's a good thing to talk about. People are so focused on other things when it comes to house shopping that I feel like the neighborhood to me is much more important.
I respect that. I think, that's a big reason why I still continue in my 40s to live in the heart of a big city. Like I like being able to walk to restaurants, bike wherever I want to go, and frankly, not have to drive more than, probably I drive once every couple of weeks. Tell you that.
All right, cool. So word on the street is the next thing we want to do. And we're going to talk about what, robotaxis in cities?
Robotaxis. Yeah. So I'll tee this one up. The robotaxis are coming. For those who have not been following us closely, at least as I have, maybe you too, Wes. Waymo and some other companies like Zoox and Tesla are expanding rapidly. A couple of years ago, it was really a sort of novelty limited to the San Francisco and Phoenix, but now they're operating in Austin, operating in Los Angeles, and there have been announcements. It's just like every week there's more of new services coming to Nashville, Denver, DC, New York, Philly, Seattle, Dallas, Miami, Boston. I could keep going. And these are not necessarily huge. We don't know exactly when they're going to come, but they do seem to be spreading fast. And there's a lot to talk about this, but I'll just say that a lot of the dialogue about robotaxis is like, oh, is it safer than a human driver or not? And I'll be honest, I don't really care. I think it's a red herring of a question because even if it is safer than a human driver, and we don't know that it is, that's a whole other issue about data quality. But is it the best way to save lives if that's the goal? It feels like there's a lot of other ways to do that. Like, I don't know, build like road diets or putting in bike lanes. That's a whole other thing to keep in mind. But I will say what I'm really interested in, and I'll get to this in a minute. I wrote a long story in Vox last week about this, is frankly what our cities are going to turn into when it's not just like a handful of robotaxis, like in the dozens or hundreds, but when you've got thousands or tens of thousands, even 100,000 robotaxis running around, because there's a real issue of deadheading, which means the vehicles that are, taking up street space when they're not moving anyone, just like ride hail does. And there's also a question of, it's a nice experience being in a robotaxi. It's, there's more private. It's a regular experience being within a car. You don't have different drivers having different behaviors, so forth and so on. And in all likelihood, people are going to want to drive a lot more, be inside cars a lot more, I should say, because it is just a nicer experience. And that could be, in my opinion, like really problematic for cities when you think about the congestion and gridlock that could result on limited street networks. So I have some proposed solutions to this, but I don't want to talk anymore for a minute. I actually am curious your own thoughts about our robotaxi revolution.
So Denver is one of those cities, like you said, we can't use them yet, but apparently they're out there in the streets being tested, or Waymo is.
You haven't seen them yet?
I've not seen it yet. I've been on the lookout. I've had sort of a camera ready in case one comes by. One of my students last night said that they saw one, so they There's some confirmation that they're out there. But I like the question that you pose, and like, what should cities do? Like, how should they respond to this? And like the way I think about this, like when you look back historically in that article, you start by doing that. And, 100 years ago, cars were the new technology. Cars were going to save us from like the manure and carcasses of horses and congestion. And it was supposed to be the panacea for all these things. And obviously it wasn't. But when you look at how cities responded back then, it was the cities that did the most to try to accommodate that new technology that were the cities that ended up being far worse off than the cities that did nothing.
And you mean what by accommodating? Just specifically, how do you mean accommodating cars? I think I know, but let's get it out there.
Like ripping out your neighborhoods to put in a highway, and an urban freeway near your downtown, like stuff like that, like expanding your arterials in order to eventually build like the high injury network. So that sort of stuff that the cities did in thinking or building parking lots, like that's another big one. So the cities that went all in on the thinking that they had to have parking for this new technology, and they would some cities tore out entire blocks and replaced it with surface parking. And like, eventually it evolved. But what I would say is that the cities that were better off really didn't do anything. They let that technology adapt to them. And that is how I think about it now. Like these autonomous vehicles should be adapting to our cities and the way we want our cities to be, like not the other way around. So like I try to urge people, like still focus on the fundamentals of transportation, like sidewalks, bike facilities, like that kind of infrastructure, good land use decision-making, less parking, like that sort of stuff makes for a good city. And the AVs have to work around us.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good framing, and it's kind of like a warning, I would say, based on what you're saying, when somebody says, oh, well, we have to make sure that we adopt these policies to accommodate AVs.
And I'm like
why? Why? What exactly are we trying to achieve with this? Because there really is like a very serious downside risk. I'd say in a couple different ways. Like if you look at San Francisco and what's happened there, and that's a city that's had robotaxis, I think, the longest. And I should be clear, Phoenix hasn't had as many problems. Phoenix is a more sprawled, auto-oriented city. It's kind of built around cars in a way that San Francisco isn't. But in San Francisco, oh my God, like there's so many videos of robotaxis dropping people off in a bike lane and taking illegal left turns and blocking streetcars, just causing mayhem in the streets. And that's something, if you scale the number of robotaxis by 100x, which by the way is exactly why these companies have gotten billions of dollars in investment, because the expectation is that they will scale.
Yeah.
You're talking about mayhem. Which, by the way, this will maybe be one of I can't speak. I'm so excited to talk about robotaxis. But this is like one of the suggestions I made in the Vox story is to adopt automatic enforcement wherever possible. Because if you can regularly fine human drivers as well as the robotaxi operators for violating traffic laws, and those fines are expensive enough, you can potentially induce the companies behind them to change their algorithms, change their programming to stop letting people off in bike lanes and stuff like that. And better do it now than when you've got 30 times as many of these self-driving cars in a city. And by the way, it's a good idea to automatic enforcement anyway, as we were talking about in last week's episode, or 2 weeks ago episode, because it's a great policy for human drivers too. To me, that's something that should happen ASAP if you want to future-proof your city for robotaxis.
Although not everybody agrees. I think you mentioned we got our first hate mail on that.
Yeah, we did. It was bittersweet that one person emailed us to say that we were derivative in our take on automatic enforcement, and I was like, oh, that's unfortunate, but you're not really getting anywhere until you get your first hater. So I was okay with it. But
when you think about it, I mean, right now, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, like built into their cost of doing business is paying tickets for double parking, all that sort of stuff. So,
and they don't even get ticketed most of the time. That's the
thing.
They
don't. They know that, so they tell their drivers to do it, and that's what these AVs. I mean, the programmers will program them to break the law.
Totally. So I think that's a really important one. And another one that I really like as an idea, this was an idea that I was talking about with Jinhua Zhao, who's a professor at MIT. I work with closely through my role as a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative. He's done a lot of research into this. But, in our robotaxi future, cars will not be parking, they will be stopping to pick somebody up and drop them off. And that means that we really don't need as much parking as we have in a lot of cities. So we definitely shouldn't be building more of it. But another point is that it actually could be very advantageous to follow our dearly departed parking guru, Donald Shoup, and price on street parking at the market rate. Because if you do that, if you have 15% of on street parking spots always available because the price rises and falls with demand, you can actually program robotaxis to treat those open parking spots as sort of auxiliary pickup and drop off points that are safe. So you don't actually have those robotaxis dropping people off in the middle of the street or double parking, which is mucking up traffic lanes and creating safety problems. It's a really great idea. Frankly, it's something I think would benefit the robotaxi companies themselves. So again, this is another move that would be good for cities, regardless of when robotaxis scale. Like right size your parking policies is what I would say.
So that sounds good in theory. In a perfect world, they're a shared resource that we don't all own our own automobiles or autonomous vehicles. Everyone's sharing the same ones, but we also know that that's probably not going to be the case in this country. Like people are probably going to own their own autonomous vehicles, and if parking costs a lot of money, like what you might do when you go to dinner downtown or you go to a meeting like on campus here, right? I could have my autonomous vehicle just circle the block for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. And that's a huge issue because you're right.
Right.
Why pay for parking? Just have it circle. And of course, while it's circling, that vehicle is going to be creating congestion that slows everybody else down.
Like the vehicle miles traveled, it could go through the roof. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons it's going to go up but like, even little things like that, or like maybe I would send it home. If I'm going to be here for a few hours, I'll send the car home, let it park there for free, and then come back and get me later.
Well,
right?
You've just led right into another one of my recommendations for how to future-proof
right.
cities, which is apply congestion pricing, like to charge for the marginal mile driven, particularly at peak times on city streets. That's a way to counteract or sort of avoid this sort of.
Are you talking like the New York City congestion charge or like a VMT tax type thing?
I think it could be either one. Just open the door to having some kind of a tax. These are heavy lift policies. They often require state governments to go along with them. I know it's not an easy thing for a city to adopt, but once you start, you basically extend the Overton window to include charging per mile driven in some way. It could be a deadheading tax, like tax the miles when these vehicles are empty, because that's sort of like an empty calories kind of driving. You can always adjust the rates as robotaxis scale or based on conditions with congestion in the future. But if you first just have to get the first policy out there, and I think New York City does offer a pretty inspiring example of what can be possible if you really go all in. I mean, I'm sure you felt we actually should talk about this in a future episode, just the bevy of benefits that have resulted already in like 6 months or 9 months in Manhattan from enacting that policy, right?
Yeah, but I think it would have to be more the VMT style one, because if your vehicle's already in the congestion zone, you can drive as much as you want in that zone without paying any additional cost. So like once I got my car downtown, I've already paid the congestion fee, let's say, and then I might as well let it circle the block for hours.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think that's right. So, a VMT would be better in that way. But I'll be honest, any kind of fee to account for the marginal costs created by cars, whether human driven or robot driven, in an urban area, to me is an important step forward. And hopefully, New York opens some minds, because it's just been such a wonderful win. I was there last week, and the traffic really was moving faster, it seemed, than what I remember from a year ago. So anyway,
I've heard the same thing, like anecdotally from people that are there. They are just saying it's great. So
there's data showing it, right? Like, I mean, again, we should talk more about this, but like traffic really is moving faster, and pollution it seems like it's down. The transit trips seem like they're doing well. There's more biking. Like it's It
All
seems
right,
like this
save it
is all
for the
positive.
next
All right,
episode.
I'll save it.
Save it for later.
But we
All
will
right.
save we'll share the Vox story in the show notes and what have you. But this is a really important topic, and it will not surprise me if we come back to our Robotaxi future in a future episode.
Yeah, I think my bottom line is just be careful. Like, don't think you need to revamp your city for them. Like,
Totally.
yeah, let's see what happens.
I think I agree. We need to find more ways that we disagree, Wes. I feel like we started off this podcast arguing over stuff, and now I'm worried that we actually agree on too much.
All right, well, let's go to the next topic, our roundabout segment. So I think you're going to take the lead on the first one here. Do you want to set that one up?
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Do you remember, Wes, how much do you know about mobility as a service? Do you remember this? It was a big thing a while ago.
Do you want me to do a monologue on this here?
No, you give me a yes, no answer if you want. That's fine.
I know enough, but it's taken. All right, just start off with your lead. I'll get into that in a second.
So this idea of mobility as a service, or MaaS, was like all the rage circa 2017, 18. And for those who don't know what it is, it's an idea that sort of was born out of telecoms. It's actually first conceived by some Finnish people. And the idea is to basically create these technology platforms that would knit together all kinds of non-car based travel. So in one app, you could plan and purchase a ticket on transit, as well as scooter share, bike share, ride hail, car share, and the added convenience of being able to do all of this in one place, jump between these modes, would theoretically be sufficient that people would say, oh, I don't need to drive at all. It's so great to have this, to have so many options in the palm of my hand, and maybe I don't even need a car at all anymore. Sounds great. Antwerp, Helsinki, Birmingham, England, Singapore were all among the cities that got really into this. Berlin is another. Some of the apps were like Wim and City Mapper and Yelby, if you've heard of them. And then basically MaaS went kaput in the last few years. It is not much. It's not, the hype is all but dead. And I think, and I've actually done some work on this, did an article basically saying like the math just doesn't work. And one of the big problems is that even in a place that has fantastic bike lanes and great transit service, the added marginal value of convenience of putting all that ticketing and planning into one place across these modes, it doesn't really add that much. Most people are just fine getting a transit ticket from the transit app or getting their bike share ride on the bike share app. There's no evidence I could find anywhere that these MaaS apps were actually changing how people travel or reducing driving. And I asked everybody for years. I was asking these companies and researchers, can you show that this is actually reducing driving in any formulation? And I just couldn't find any evidence at all. I just kept getting sort of like corporate spiel about how beautiful the apps are. And I'm like, I don't care how beautiful it is. Like, is it changing behavior? So there's a reason I've been thinking about this lately. I'll get to that in a second, but Wes, I'll pause my rock throwing and let you weigh in on whether MaaS is legit.
Well, let me back up for a second. I think I will answer your original question, because one of the things that annoyed me about MaaS, like in addition to the acronym itself, is that nobody could really ever tell me what it was. So back, I go to a lot of transportation conferences. So like at TRB, for instance, you started hearing incessantly about mobility as a service. And at first, people were just telling me, well, no one's ever going to need to own a car again because we can just subscribe to a shared card service. I was like, oh, so it's like a company like Car2Go, but somehow better. They'd be like, oh, no, you don't get it. It's not a company. It's like an app where you get to reserve the car. Then you get to see what the traffic's like, and you get to drive to the park and ride. You know how many parking spaces are already in that park and ride that are available. You can pay to park. You can jump on the train. You can reserve the scooter when you get off, and you can go to your final destination. So I'm like, you're saying it's like a big middleman app. They're like, no, you don't get it. Like, you can pay for all these things too. I'd be like, okay, great. But like, is it going to cost me more to use that app than if I just paid for them separately? And they'd be like, well, a little bit. Like, how else is a MaaS company going to make money? I'd be like, I thought you told me this wasn't a company. Like, which is it? Like, I couldn't ever wrap my head around what it was. That was my annoyance from the get-go.
Well, I respect your instinctive pushback against it, because God knows there are many transportation academics who responded to the hype around MaaS, not by being like, I don't know what this is, but by instead launching 1,000 studies that were all theoretical as far as I could tell about how a optimal MaaS system could transform a transportation network. I remember I said to a friend of mine a couple of years ago, I think there's more people studying MaaS than there are people actually using it.
You're probably right.
I know, it's and they're still coming out. I still look at these academic journals and I'm like, are you kidding me? There's still the like MaaS optimization papers that are getting published. And I don't know. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not making this
Yeah, oh,
up.
yeah. No, you're not making it up. A lot of academics are still into it. I mean, there are legitimate things that I had wanted this. I mean, back when, I was like 20 and I had the Massachusetts fast lane pass, right? It didn't work in New York because they had the easy pass system. Like they eventually fixed that without me having to interface with some middleman trying to squeeze some extra money out of me on each and every transaction. Kind of like those parking apps are doing now. But, it feels like MaaS treats mobility like Amazon Prime or like the Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO bundle. Like, and honestly, the last thing like I need in my life is another subscription service.
Yeah.
Plus, like you can't subscribe your way out of poor transit service, like dangerous streets,
right?
And like bad land use planning. Like those things are fundamental.
No, that's actually a huge point. Like I remember, like I was actually advising a transit system how to think about MaaS several years ago in North America, and what I said at the time was like, honestly, if MaaS is not inducing people to drive less in a place like Helsinki or Antwerp that has great transit service and great bike lanes, do we really think that it's going to get anybody to do much of anything differently in a North American city that has 45-minute headways for transit lines and a lack of bike lanes on most major routes? I think that part of the hype around it in North America was because, I have some empathy for them. I guess some transportation public sector leaders, maybe transit agency leaders, kind of knew they didn't have the money to expand service. So they're like, well, at least I can do this. I can do MaaS maybe, and that maybe I can grow ridership that way. It's just that, to your point, Wes, like 10 times out of 10, if your city has a choice, you should be investing in the basics, in the bike lanes and the transit service, rather than in some sort of an overlay to make it easier to jump between modes, I would say.
And once if you're in a city all the time, like you already know how it all works. Like you don't need that additional system, and it only sort of helps if you go to a new city and you don't really know.
Yeah,
like,
that's
the
also
individual
right.
corporation. I mean, but the problem is too is that it can't scale well from city to city, state to state, country to country because it's all so different everywhere you go. So it feels like a tech fix to a political problem, and I think these companies have all learned that it's really hard to make money on transportation.
No, I think that's right. And I know we want to talk. I want to hear about your roundabout topic too. But maybe if I can offer one last point, I was thinking about MaaS, and I sort of brought it up as our topic or suggested our topic for today because last week I was moderating a panel at APTA's big conference. This is the American Public Transportation Association, and it was a panel discussion about mobility hubs with Andy Byford, Train Daddy, and some leaders from WMATA and from a couple other places from the MPO of Southern California. And mobility hubs, for those who don't know, are kind of like to me, it's like an analog version of MaaS. It's like a physical place where you have transit service along with bike share and maybe ride hail that can come together and facilitate transfers easily. And I said on the panel, I was like, honestly, I get like flashbacks to MaaS dialogue sometimes when people are talking about how great mobility hubs are, and they aren't talking about behavior change or sharing data about how a great mobility hub led people to drive less and take transit and bike share more. They're just talking about how beautiful the design is of the mobility hub, or just how clever it was structured. And I find myself, I don't know, my takeaway lesson from that was to basically say, like, when there's something new and trendy in transportation, I really think it's worth pausing to take a moment, step back and ask, like, what actually is the success metric here that should matter? And can you get data around it? Because I feel like with MaaS, I wasn't able to. And that would set off some alarm bells that feel like they were justified in retrospect.
Yeah, Union Station here is an interesting example because it was closed for decades, I think, and then it opened up before the train even opened up. And
This
it
is
was
Union Station, Denver, just for folks who
Union
may not be
Station,
aware.
Denver, so like a half mile from here, and it was like a hopping place to be for a while, and it had nothing to do with the transportation because the train hadn't even opened yet. But it was just a place like with restaurants and like other stuff
Yeah.
that was there. Like once the train came, it became more of that mobility hub. But I think a lot of people are just itching to have good places to go like that, and the train is almost an amenity. It reminds me of like Dan Chapman had that paper like, does TOD even need the T? And he found that the places were just good, compact, walkable development were getting the same benefits as the places that had that plus transit. Like it wasn't all that different.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, and that's a whole other question, which maybe we could explore later, which is like, is a really good train station or mobility hub one that facilitates people to like race through it as easily as they need to get to between one mode and another? Or is it a place to linger and have fun and get a drink and catch up with people? I actually think it's an open question, and the answers can be kind of complex.
I would lean towards the latter. Like that's what I feel like we want. But, when you call it a mobility hub, I think it's sort of missing the point of it as a place in itself.
Yeah, no, it kind of depends on the city, doesn't it, Wes? Like, think about Moynihan Station in New York that deliberately doesn't have seating in part because they want people to just sort of go through it. They don't want people to linger. Maybe that's what you get in like a big city and a major hub, and that's a unique case. But I don't know. It definitely is not designed to me as a place where you hang out.
When I go to Grand Central Station, like I'm walking around taking pictures of the building and like stuff like that. Like when I go to Penn Station, I'm trying to get through there as quickly as humanly possible, right? So which do we want? I would say the former, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting. I actually think it's not an obvious answer. You get different answers, maybe from planners versus engineers. The engineers want to maximize throughput to oversimplify, and the planners like having public spaces that induce people to linger. I tend to lean toward the planner's perspective, but I think there's a room for discussion. You don't?
I do, but I mean, I'm obviously an engineer, and I'm apparently not talking like an engineer in this instance here.
Well,
but
you never talk like most engineers. You know that. That's why you wrote a whole book basically telling them that they're killing people.
All right. Why don't we go on to the next roundabout topic?
Go ahead. It's yours. I'm listening. It's all you.
All right. So I want to talk about bike lanes. I mean, and kind of the evolution of bike lanes and getting a little bit into the bikelash. So, 10 or 15 years ago, like even like a basic painted bike lane was a win. And like it felt like we were moving in the right direction. But now we look at those same old bike lanes and we see them as unsafe, inadequate. Like I would even look at Sharrows and like they're bordering on malpractice on a lot of streets. But
born in Denver, born in your city.
Yeah, they were definitely invented here. So I think we've come to see, the better bike lanes now have separation or protection, and people started to realize that we need, not just good facilities, but good networks and low stress, continuous connectivity. So like when I look into the future, what I want to see is that we're going to look back on today's good protected bike lanes and see them as inadequate. Like they feel like we need real protection. Like the fake plastic bollards aren't really protecting people. But what I'm worried about is that we're seeing a pushing back against good bike lanes. We're even seeing removing or diluting of the kind of stuff that was being celebrated not too long ago. So a couple examples I've noticed. So San Mateo, California, like they're removed Humboldt Street bike lanes, and it's the longest continuous route in the city. They put back in 100 parking spaces. Or in Houston, they had that facility, I think it was on Austin Street. Like it was part of their bigger plan. They removed it and they replaced it with a Sharrow. So, these aren't just small tweaks. It's a giant shift in what we're accepting to be as good bike infrastructure. But it's the political and community pressures that are leading us to provide what we know is less safe intersections. So a question for you, like given, I think, how far we've come in our understanding of good bike infrastructure and how it's evolved, like, do you feel like we should be holding cities to that higher standard? Or is it okay to go back in time and provide the Sharrows and the regular painted bike lanes that we used to deem as good?
I mean, of course, it's not okay to go back to sharrows and painted bike lanes. I mean, those are objectively inferior, if not useless, in the case of sharrows installations, right? Like, how could I possibly say that's a good idea? I'm not mad at you. I'm just like,
No,
this is not a difficult question to answer.
A lot of people would say there's bigger fish to fry. Like, oh, I mean, how many cyclists do you even see on that street? I mean, we need parking more than we need a bike lane. Like, that's the kind of arguments you get. You go to any public meeting about this, even the ones that have maintained their goodness, like you still get those pushbacks. Well, the bikelash.
That pushback has always been there, isn't it? Like those arguments in favor of parking or saying, oh, small businesses are going to get crushed if you install a protected bike lane. This has been a narrative. These are narratives that have been around since we had the bike boom kind of began in US cities 15 years ago, don't you think?
Well, it's a narrative, but it's also starting to win, though. Like that's the problem where I'm at. Like, so in 10 years, I think we're going to look back and wish we had bike lanes like we do now, instead of looking ahead and knowing, hopefully, that they would be better than they are now. Like, I feel like we're going to start heading in the wrong direction.
I actually think I may be a little more optimistic than you on this. I was talking, it's funny, I was talking with the War on Cars guys about this a few weeks ago for something else. And, like a big difference, like, because we've had bike booms before in this country, right? Like the early 70s, 1970s, let alone the 1890s for that, if you really want to go back. And then they petered out and we never really changed our infrastructure, right? It feels like the last 15 years are different, in part, I think, because of bike share. Like so many more people are casual cyclists in big dense cities in North America than were in, say, 2005, 20 years ago. I think that creates an embedded basis of support that didn't exist before. Also, I think climate change is a tailwind for biking that's going to endure. I do think that we're living in a time of bikelash right now, for sure. But there's a number of cities you can see this in. You can see it in Boston, you can see it in Houston, you can see it in my city, in Washington, D.C., where we just, the mayor just backpedaled off of planned bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue Northwest a year ago, which we absolutely need in the city. But I just can't see a wholesale reversal, at least here in D.C. It's impossible to imagine, unless the Republicans in Congress get involved, I suppose, of removing the bike infrastructure that's gone the last 15 years. I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Let the people who are sort of like fighting back against it have their moment. But I mean, look, Mamdani is going to be mayor of New York soon. Let's see how many bike lanes get installed then, because that guy is. I've spoken about this. He is a bike lane believer. I feel like the arc of bike lanes bends toward improvement, shall we say.
Well, you brought up the early 70s, and like if you look at the original AASHTO bike guide, so AASHTO is the American Association of State Transportation and Highway Officials, like they're known as an old school car-oriented thing. So I think their original bike guide was from 1974, and it had a lot of separated and protected bike lanes in it. It was something you'd look at today and say, oh, that would be great if we had that. And then along came John Forrester. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I do. The villain of the last 50 years from amongst cyclists. But go ahead. I know exactly who he is.
Like he did that study. I wouldn't even call it a study. So in the 70s, he was not an transportation engineer. He was an industrial engineer. He was biking around Palo Alto, and he likes to bike on the streets, and he was trying to prove that it's safer to bike on the streets than on the off-street trails that they were building. So he did a study where he biked on all his streets like he always did, and then one time he biked on the trail, and he tried to bike as fast as he normally would that he does on the street. And I think he said he had like 7 insipid collisions or something like that. And he ended up concluding that the off-street trails were 1,000 times more dangerous than biking on the road. And for whatever reason, like that thinking perpetuated through transportation engineering for decades. Like the next iteration of the AASHTO bike guide, nothing of the sort of separated protected bike lanes.
Like vehicular cycling, right? Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, vehicular cycling. And when I was a grad student, I remember my teacher my professor telling me it's safer to bike in the street than off the street on a trail. And I'm like, oh my God, how? Like, I don't understand that
No,
this
this
doesn't
guy
make
did a lot of damage.
any sense to me.
Yeah.
Like the funny thing is, like when we published that paper basically showing that cities with more protected and separated bike paths were not just safer for bicyclists, but safer for everyone. I'm still sort of annoyed at the Journal of Transportation and Health, but they let somebody publish a letter to the editor trying to tear apart my study. And it was these vehicular cycling advocates, pointing out stuff like correlation, not causation, like stuff like that. And I was able to write a retort to their thing. And in the original draft of that, I went pretty hard at them because all their stuff was nonsense and not scientific. And I asked a couple of friends of mine who I trust who are professors. Peter Firth and Kerry Watkins, one's at Northeastern, the other is at UC Davis. And they told me I needed to pull back and be nicer. And I did a little bit, but ever since that was published, I wish I hadn't. So when Kerry really wanted to see a copy of my book before I publish it, I'm like, no, I don't want you to talk me out of going hard.
No, I think, John Forster really is a villain of transportation. The idea that someone biking should be treated as a car for planning purposes it's just insane.
Even
that
kids,
was his core idea. Yeah. Just treat them like a car. That share they should be on a street or a road as though they were a car. It's wild, but it's good if you're a car-oriented engineer because then you don't have to worry about any sort of special anything for cyclists. So I don't think we're going back to that though, Wes. Like, I'm sorry, I know he like triggers you and rightfully so. Triggers me too. But I feel like we're wiser now than we were in 1976. We're not going back to that.
I did meet him once. There's a picture of he and I with like his arm around me I think I was in Davis at the National Bike Museum or something.
Yeah, you burn that photo, get rid of the negatives, don't let anybody know it ever happened.
I don't know where it is. I would like to find it if I could. I don't know what happened to it.
I don't know. That's not one I would be framing it, but I don't know your life.
He was already I think he was 89 or 90 by then. And he said a lot of very inappropriate things to a friend of mine on the tram back to Sacramento.
Boy. All right, let's reel this back in. All right, enough John Forster bashing. We're at time for mailbag. Can I offer a couple emails? By the way, we're getting more emails to being or more questions coming to our email, which is lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And there are some interesting ones. Also, some people just reach out to us individually. The first question is, I'm sorry, but it's just for me. But Tim in New York wanted to know whether my cat, Waffle House, is spelled with one word or two. And there is an answer to that. The answer is two. It is just like the chain of diners, Waffle House in the South. And I realize we have some listeners from outside the US. So if you don't know what Waffle House is, it's basically a chaotic but friendly diner where you can get, coffee and waffles and hash browns very cheap all across the South. It's ubiquitous. And
24/7.
There's just wild like fights break out. It's wild, but I kind of like it. So does my wife, actually. Sorry.
So is your cat's middle name House?
No. Good question. No, we just named it Waffle House because he conveys this air of genial chaos, and he's also yellow, which is the branding color of Waffle House, so it seemed to fit. He doesn't have a last name. He's just Waffle House, and we call him Waffles for short for no good reason. But I just wanted to clarify that because I have a feeling we're going to hear him if not see him on a future episode, so might as well get that out. So thank you, Tim, for the question. Now I've got one I'm going to kick over to you. This one's from Finland, from Antti in Finland, who asks, is Vision Zero a process or a goal or both? Wes, your thoughts?
It's both. I mean, it's supposed to be sort of a moral imperative to do stuff. And I think we, at least in this country, we set it as a goal, but we don't really. It's a fake goal. It's pie in the sky. Like, very few engineers really think it's achievable. So it needs to be reframed more on the process side. Like, if it is truly the moral imperative that we think it is, if we do really set that as a goal, it needs to change the process much more so than it's doing now. Like right now, it's kind of business as usual, and we're just calling it Vision Zero. if we really want to get there, the process has to be revamped. So it has to go hand in hand, but we need to treat them in conjunction in some better way than we do now.
I would argue it's entirely a process, actually, personally, because I think outside of a place like Hoboken that has no arterials, basically, as far as I can tell, like you're
Yeah,
just
they've won.
not. They've won. Yeah, you're just not gonna get like zero deaths is not gonna happen. It's
Not
a
with that attitude, man.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like, didn't I talk about this on one of our very first episodes about how there was a transit CEO or a city, actually, it was a city DOT CEO who told me, like, honestly, Vision Zero has demoralized countless numbers of well intentioned city staff because they feel like you're setting a goal they can never achieve. And more problematically, Wes, I think that some city leaders end up only latching on to the zero deaths part and they don't pay any attention to the process, which is the whole purpose of like, acknowledging that humans are fallible and we make mistakes. Those mistakes shouldn't be fatal. I personally would really like it to be a process. And I think it should be a process rather than a goal.
Well, I think it helps to have that goal where, I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, Helsinki, Oslo, like there are real cities beyond Hoboken that have achieved it in some way, shape, or form. So, like, why not try to do that? And I think we could, but we aren't really even trying to do so. Like, if we really wanted to achieve Vision Zero in U.S. cities, we would just stop allowing cars to go faster than 20 or 25 in any urban place that has people walking around or biking. But we're not willing to do that. Therefore, we're not really trying to do Vision Zero. So it's tricky. Like, I think it needs to evolve more towards the process, but you need that goal in order to inform the process, if that makes sense.
I guess I don't know. I worry we fixate on at least in North America, we fixate on the goal and just ignore the process. Unlike
Yeah.
Scandinavia, where they really understand exactly what is and is not Vision Zero, and I respect that very much. So, Antti, maybe there's a different answer for North America versus Europe. And I know you're from Finland, so you have, I guess, maybe it's a different perspective in that way. Are we? How are we doing on time? Should we?
I think it is time for rail drinks, my friend.
Ooh, rail drinks. All right, so we've got more questions we're going to save for the next time. But let me reach over and grab my drink. What do you have?
So today I have Wild Turkey 101. So I'll tell a quick story here. Many years ago, I was searching for like a bourbon or whiskey that wasn't expensive that I really liked. And I reached out to, the sort of dudes that do like blogs and websites that look at whiskey. I was like, what cheap whiskeys are good? And I got a list of like 5 or 6. I tried them all. And this one I really like, and it's not that expensive. So it's not Wild Turkey. It's Wild Turkey 101. And it is one of my favorites. And, since then, I've been drinking it on the regular.
Interesting. You really are a whiskey guy. You are consistent. I will give you credit. I have something different. I have Miedovacha right here, which is plum liqueur, plum brandy. I'm pretty sure this is from the Czech Republic, but I'm going to be honest with you. I've had this for a really long time because for a while I was spending a lot of time in Eastern Europe and like accumulating fun liqueurs. So I was looking through my liquor cabinet of like, what would I like to drink? I was like, oh, I forgot I even have this, but I do love a good Slavic liqueur or brandy, and this one tastes like honey. I'm told. So
Right.
down the chute. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Or not na zdraví, I should say in Czech. Ooh, that one's got a kick. Ooh, ah. All right. So, and thus concludes, I think this is episode 6. Is that right, Wes?
Yes, sir.
Of Look Both Ways. All right. We always appreciate everybody who joined us live. And if you're listening afterwards via podcast, that's terrific too. Please do. God, I'm like sucking on like making noises because I really it was a potent little shot I did. Please do give us feedback. Send us your questions for mailbag at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. You can always reach me at davidzipper.com. And Wes doesn't like to talk to anyone, so you have to track him down on Blue Sky if you want to find him. Right? If you ever change your mind, you can tell me. But until you do, I'm just going to keep saying that. And we do have the next episode scheduled, which is going to be on Tuesday, October 7th at 6 p. EST. You're always welcome to join the live stream. Those of you who did today, we're glad to see you there. And again, if you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it. It does matter. It helps. And just tell a friend. We love seeing more and more people reach out from all over the world and let us know what they think about what we described and what we discussed. So keep it coming. So on that note, I will say thanks for joining. Wes, a pleasure. And until October 7th.
All right. See you next time.